Speaker.
Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to take a short call on this, the first reading of the Policing Cost Recovery Amendment Bill. The Green Party opposes this bill. We've been told that the core police services are there to benefit society and so therefore should be provided by baseline funding. And the example the Minister gave was frontline services. But this bill is proposing that where benefit primarily accrues to individuals or private organisations rather than society as a whole, police should be able to recover costs. Yet, as has already been pointed out in the debate, this bill doesn't consider cost recovery in all situations that could be described in that way. For example, commercial use of police, say, for large concerts or sports events where there may, I suggest, be massive profits to be made. This bill applies primarily to police vetting. And police undertake vetting mostly in situations for education, community services, health services, public services. And the Teachers' Council is the biggest organisation using police vetting. The regulatory impact statement has recognised that there has been increased demand on these services, and indeed the Minister noted that in 2013 457,000 requests were put into the police for police vetting, and that demand is still rising. Yet there has been no increase in the police budget to allow them to do this work. In fact, the government has cut the police budget by $114 million in real terms since 2009. And we've heard from the government side of the House tonight that this is it's not about raising money for the police, it's just about cost recovery. Well, I think that's playing with words, really. This wasn't until now, well, this job was up till this point considered a core function of the police. And as a service to the public, so that we could all have a degree of kind of feeling of safety when we accessed services where we might be vulnerable or our children might be vulnerable. And in fact, a core reason that there's been increased demand for this service is because of the Vulnerable Children's Act imposing mandatory vetting. And I'd like to just read out the purpose of the section that applied to the safety checks from the Vulnerable Children's Act, which says, quote, "The purpose of this part is to reduce the risk of harm to children by requiring people employed or engaged in work that involves regular or overnight contact with children to be safety checked," unquote. Now how is that more a private good than a public good? The government, on one hand, through the most significant piece of legislation that went through this Parliament last term, said this is mandatory because this is essential to public safety. And now here we are, only a few months later in this House, and the government is saying this is not a public good, this is a private benefit, and let's charge for it. It doesn't make sense. The Minister has characterised the plan to charge a small fee for something that previously had been free. And they're saying it's around $7 per cheque, and that most organisations would be easily able to absorb that. Well, schools, the Teachers' Council do about 40,000 vets a year. So that's a cost of around $300,000 a year being transferred from our schools to the police. Has the government not heard of the old adage, a stitch in time? Our children would be better off us investing in these mechanisms to protect them before something goes wrong. And while crime is supposedly going down, except for domestic violence and sexual violence, crime's quite relevant to this topic, the government is moving funding from community services that protection and our schools into policing. It makes no sense, and the Greens are proud to oppose this bill.